Metal treads crushed gravel beneath me, every clank echoing like thunder through the cul-de-sac. The engine roared low, unsteady, shaking windows as I rolled down the street toward my own house. Neighbors froze on their porches, cameras already in hand. Kids dropped their bikes. Dogs barked hysterically. At the end of the block there, she was clipboard clutched like a sword, eyes bulging with indignation. Ho Karen, the self-proclaimed guardian of property values. Her jaw dropped as the tank came to a grinding halt right in my yard. She hard-fined me, threatened me, even tried to tow my pickup. She said I'd never park on her grass again. So, I took her at her word and rolled in with something she never expected. Before we dive into the chaos that followed, let me know in comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. The funny thing is, my house isn't anything fancy. It's a plain totery with faded shutters and a yard I keep neat enough to keep the bugs down and the neighbors from no fountains, no flower beds shaped like swans, just grass, a couple of maple trees, and enough driveway to park the cars without blocking the sidewalk. For me, that's enough. I didn't move here to impress anyone. I moved here to live. But in Maple Estates, living apparently comes second to looking uniform. That's where She comes in. Karen, though her legal name is Rosanna Gibson, appointed herself the neighborhood's guardian of aesthetics, president of the HOA, armed with a clipboard, a whistle, and an inflated sense of power that would make a dick blush. Her lipstick was always too red, her hair too stiff, and her heels clicked across the pavement like a metronome of misery. She didn't just enforce the rules, she created them, usually on the spot. The first time she'd noticed my truck, I'd just come home from a late job. It was after midnight and the driveway was packed. My wife's car, my son's college beater, and my daughter's hand-down SUV left no space for my pickup. The street was lined with neighbors' vehicles, and frankly, I wasn't about to circle for parking like I lived in downtown Manhattan. So, I did what any reasonable man would do. I pulled my truck halfway onto my own yard. I didn't think much of it. Grass grows back, right? The next morning I woke up to a voice that could curdle milk. Excuse me. There she was, standing in the dew-soaked grass, glaring at my truck like it had personally insulted her ancestors. Clipboard and handpen already scribbling. This is a violation, she barked as though reading from scripture. Section 4B, no parking on unpaved surfaces. You are devaluing the community. I rubbed my eyes, still half asleep. Ma'am, this is my yard. She gasped like I'd confessed to burning the American flag. Your yard, sir. This is Maple property. The community has standards and you will comply. I should have laughed. Honestly, I did chuckle a little, but that only made her angrier. She wrote something furiously on her clipboard and shoved a neon pink slip under my windshield wiper. First offense. Consider this a warning. That was the beginning of the storm. At first, I thought it was just one bad morning. Maybe she was having a rough day, maybe she'd cool off. But Karen wasn't the type to cool off. She was the type to ignite. 2 days later, Antithernit appeared in my mailbox. Violation #2 continued. Unauthorized parking. Fine. $150. A week later, another, this time with photos. Yes, she had marched onto my property at night, flashlight in one hand and camera in the other, snapping pictures like some kind of budget paparazzi. By the third fine, I realized that this wasn't just an overzealous neighbor, this was war. Neighbors started whispering. Some rolled their eyes and muttered, "That's just Karen." Others avoided me entirely, like associating with the man parking on his would get them fined. 2. I ignored the letters at first. I figured, let her rant, let her send paper. Button came, the towing attempt. It was a Saturday morning. I heard clanking outside and thought maybe construction was happening down the block. I looked out my window and nearly spit out my coffee. A tow truck had backed into mired chains, already being hooked onto my pickup, and there she was, standing beside it with her hands on her hips like a queen, surveying her conquest. I stormed outside in my slippers. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The tow guy looked sheepish. Ma'am, here says your vehicle's illegally parked on Hope." She signed an order. "It's my lawn," I shouted, pointing at the house towering directly behind me. "See that? My house, my yard, my truck." Karen sneered. "This community has rules. You are not above them." That was the moment the sarcasm in me couldn't resist. "You're right, Karen," I said calmly. "I'm not above the rules. I'm on top of them. See?" I tapped the grass under my bare foot. "Perfectly fine. No pocket. If you want to stop me, you'll need more than a clipboard." The tow guy shrugged, clearly uncomfortable, and unhooked the chains. He muttered something about not wanting to get sued and drove off, leaving Karen standing alone in the street. Her face twisted with rage. She wagged her pen at me like she wanted to stab me with it. "You'll regret this. The board will hear about you." And that's when it clicked. This wasn't about grass. It wasn't about trucks. It wasn't even about community standards. It was about control. Karen couldn't stand the idea that someone, anyone, wouldn't bend to her will. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. The moment you let a bully win, once they'll never stop coming back. So I smiled, leaned against me truck, and gave her the calmest reply I could muster. "Karen, if you think this is the hill you want to die on, Then I hope you brought snacks because I'm not moving. Her gasp could have sucked the leaves off the trees. From that day forward, the harassment wasn't just paperwork, it was personal. She called out my name at HOA meetings, waving blown-up photos of my truck like evidence in a courtroom. She told neighbors I was bringing down property values. She even spread rumors that I was a danger to the neighborhood. Loud, reckless, defiant, the truth. I just wanted to live in peace. But Karen wanted war. And she was about to find out I fight wars. A little differently than she expected, the mailbox became a war zone. Every morning before I even poured my coffee, I'd find another envelope wedged inside, stamped with the HOAS logo like it was some kind of federal summons. Karen must have stood over her printer at night, giggling as she hit print on another violation 4, improper vehicle storage. Violation 5, unkempt grass due to tire tracks. Violation 6, failure to respect community bylaws. By the time I hit number 7, the fines stacked into the thousands. I could wallpaper my living room with her letters, and trust me, I considered it. At least then her nonsense would serve a decorative purpose. But Karen wasn't satisfied with paper. One night I caught her red-handed. It was past 11, the street eerily quiet, and I just finished fixing a leaky pipe in the basement. As I stepped outside for fresh air, a flash went off. There she was, crouched in my bushes, snapping photos of my truck like a wildlife photographer stalking a rare rhinoceros. I shouted, enjoying the view. She froze, eyes wide, then scurried away without a word, heels clicking like retreating gunfire. The next morning, sure enough, Violation 8 landed in my mailbox, complete with time-stamped photos. At that point, I realized Karen had gone from HOA president to full-blown stalker. It wasn't just me, though. She weaponized the neighborhood against me. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street, who used to wave at me every morning, suddenly avoided eye contact. The Peterson kids who used to mow my lawn in summer for extra cash stopped coming around. Word spread that associating with meant risking Karen's wrath. It became clear he was the community's new villain. The final straw came at an HOA meeting. Now, I never enjoyed those gatherings. A room full of adults arguing about mailbox paint shades is not my idea of a productive evening, but this time Karen made sure the whole neighborhood showed up. She stood at the front next to a projector screen, and what was on this screen? A slideshow. My truck, my yard, my crimes. Each photo punctuated by her voice, sharp and triumphant. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of behavior dragging down our property values. This is what happens when one man refuses to follow rules designed for all of us. She pointed at me like I was a criminal on trial. Do we want Maple Crest to look like a junkyard? Do we want our children growing up thinking chaos is acceptable? A few people nodded nervously. Others looked away embarrassed. I raised my, "Can I respond?" Karen smirked. "By all means, dig your own grave." So I stood, straightened my shirt, and walked to the front. "Folks," I began, "I bought my house outright. I pay my taxes. My yard is my property. If parking a pickup truck on my grass is the apocalypse, then I guess the world's ending a lot sooner than we thought." Some chuckles rippled through the room. Karen's face wrinkled. "I'm not here to wreck any neighborhood, but I'll tell you something. It's not trucks that destroy communities. It's people who think they're kings and queens of the block. People who care more about power than neighbors." That line got applause. Not thunderous, but enough. Karen's smile cracked, but she wasn't done. "The board has voted," she snapped. "If you continue violating our bylaws, fines will accrue. If unpaid liens may be placed against your property. You will comply or you will lose." And there it was, the mask fully off. This wasn't about grass, this was about ownership. She wanted, and she'd squeeze me until I broke. But I wasn't going to break. The harassment intensified after that. Shuffled complaints with the city about excessive noise from my property lies. She left anonymous tips about possible code violations. She even called animal control on my dog, Duke, claiming he barked all night. Duke, by the way, is 12 years old and snores louder than he barks. One afternoon, I came home to find a bright orange sticker plastered in my front door. Notice of community non-compliance. My wife rolled her eyes. My son crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. But me, I laughed because by then I saw the pattern. Karen was trying to wear me down, break me through exhaustion. But see, there's a funny thing about people like her. The more they push, the more they reveal how powerless they really are. She thought her clipboard made her a general. But me, I'd been in real battles. I knew what war looked like, and this wasn't war. This was theater. So I decided if she wanted a show, I'd give her one she'd never forget. It started small. I stopped reacting to her notes. No more angry shouting across the lawn. No more sarcastic jabs. Just silence. Let her think she was winning. The neighbors noticed. "Guess you finally gave in," one of them said. I just smiled. Something like that. Behind the scenes, though, I was planning. I called an old friend, a fellow veteran who now ran a private collection of decommissioned military vehicles. I asked if his prized possession was still in storage. Hedge called. "The tank. Yeah, she's still sitting pretty." "Why?" "Because I said I've aggroed a parking problem and I think she's the solution." Silence on the line for a beat, then laughter. You're insane. Maybe, I replied, but you'll see what I mean. And with that, the gears of my own war machine began to turn. Karen thought could intimidate me with fines, threats, and gossip. But she was about to learn something important. When you push a man long enough, sometimes he pushes back harder than you ever imagined. And sometimes he pushes back with 30 tons of steel. I wish I could say it didn't get to me, that I shrugged off every letter, every accusation, every rumor, like water off a duck's back. But the truth, it started to wear me down. I'd come home from work, drop me keys on the counter, and find my wife already holding another violation notice like it was a summon to court. My daughter rolled her eyes at the gossip she overheard at school. Your dad's the guy ruining the neighborhood. My son, normally calm, punched a hole in his bedroom wall one night after hearing Karen call us trashy in front of the pedestrians. It wasn't just me under attack, it was my family. And that's the thing about bullies, they don't stop at you. They try to make everyone around you pay until you fold. So, I decided enough was enough. The HOA meeting where Earthline was finally drawn looked like something out of a bad reality show. Folding chairs in a stuffy rec center, a cheap microphone that squealed every time someone breathed near it, and Karen standing at the front like a queen without a crown. She was armed with her usual photos of my truck printed on glossy paper, red circles and a row scribbled in marker like she was presenting evidence to the Supreme Court behind her. The board members nodded along a chorus of bobbleheads, too spineless to think for themselves. When my name came up on the agenda, Karen's grin widened. "Mr. Thompson," she said, dragging out my name like a tasted sour. "Once again, you've chosen to flagrantly disregard the bylaws. Your vehicle remains parked on unpaved property. Your actions continue to lower property values and disrespect this community." She slapped a photo onto the table for dramatic effect. "This is not acceptable, and tonight the board has vetted to begin lien proceedings if compliance is not immediate." A murmur spread across the room. Some neighbors looked shocked, others just avoided my gaze. I stood slowly, adjusted my jacket, and walked to the front. Karen smirked, certain I was about to beg for mercy. Instead, I picked up the photo she'd slapped down and held it high. "This," I said, "is a picture of a truck. My truck parked on my yard. A yard he bought, a yard he bought, a yard I mow, a yard I pay taxes on." A few chuckles. Someone in the back muttered, "He's got a point." Karen's face tightened. "That land is subject to community bylaws." I cut her off. "Karen, with all due respect, your bylaws don't override property rights. This isn't a dictatorship, it's a neighborhood. Anthe, last time I checked, a man's yard is his yard." Applause broke out. Not everyone, but enough to rattle her composure. I leaned in, slightly lowering my voice so the room had to lean forward too. "Here, I've served overseas. I've dealt with people who actually had power, the kind that came with weapons and armies, and I'll tell you something, none of them scared me. So if you think a clipboard and a couple of fines are going to break me, you've picked the wrong target." The room went dead quiet. Karen's smile faltered, then twisted into anger. "You think you're special because you were in the military. That doesn't put you above the rules." I straightened. "No, Karen, it doesn't put me above the rules, but it does mean ickno when someone is abusing them." The board shuffled uncomfortably. One of them coughed into his hand. An author looked down at his notes, but Karen wasn't done. She slammed her hand on the table. "Daily fines will continue, and when you can't pay, we'll take action. I promise you, Mr. Thompson, you will regret defying this board." Her voice echoed through the room, shrill and venomous. And that's when I decided right then and there, if this was Thea Hill she wanted to die on, I was going to dig trenches and build walls. If she wanted a war about parking, I was going to give her one she'd never forget. The rest of the meeting blurred. I went home, sat at the kitchen table, and looked at my family. My wife squeezed my hand silently, asking if I was okay. My son leaned forward, eyes blazing with the kind of fire only teenagers have. My daughter, usually quiet, said softly, "Dad, don't let her win." That was all I needed. I stayed up late that night going through old contacts on my phone. I scrolled past names I hadn't seen in years, men I served with, people who'd helped me in tougher times. Finally, I found the one I needed. "Rick," I said when he picked up his voice, groggy. "It's me. Listen, I've got a favor to ask. Remember that little toy you showed me last time I visited your ranch?" There was silence, then laughter. "You mean the tank?" "Yeah," I said. "That one," he whistled. "You're not serious." I've never been more serious in my life. The plan started forming like a blueprint. In my head, not reckless, not violent, just bold enough to make a point. If Karen wanted to make parking the battlefield, I was about to show her what real parking looked like. Of course, I didn't tell my family the details. Not yet. Ali said was, "I've got this handled," because when you've reached your break-in, the point, when a bully has pushed you so far you can't breathe, there's only one option left. Push back harder. Karen thought she was fighting a man with a truck. She had no idea she was about to face a man with a tank. When you've lived long enough, you learn that revenge isn't something you rush. It's like barbecue. You don't slap it on the grill and hope for the best. You take your time. You let it smoke, simmer and soak in flavor until it's ready. That's exactly how I treated my little parking problem. After that explosive HOA meeting, I went quiet. No shouting matches with Karen. No sarcastic comebacks when she strutted past my lawn. I didn't so much as twitch when yet another violation showed up in my mailbox. I just smiled, nodded, and carried on, because while she thought she was winning, while she thought her daily fines and idle threats were burying me, I was planning something that would flip the script so hard the neighborhood wouldn't know what hit it. My first call was to Rick. Now Rick isn't your average guy. He's one after us fellows who never fully left the army behind. While the rest of us traded uniforms for jeans and backyard grills, Rick collected history, real history, military vehicles, decommissioned artillery memorabilia, stuff most people in the see in museums, and his prized possession, a decommissioned M60 pack, 30 tons of steel, legally owned, demilitarized, but every bit as intimidating as the day it rolled off the factory line. Let me get this straight, Rick said, still laughing into the phone. You want to park the tank in your yard? As in literally, roll it up onto your grass and leave it there. Exactly, I replied. Karen says no trucks. Fine, I won't park a truck. I'll park something better. There was silence on the line. Then Rick broke into a wheezing laugh. You're insane and I love it. He agreed to help. Said he'd bring it in on a flatbed trailer. No big deal. Just another oversized delivery in suburbia. The next step was logistics. Parking a tank isn't as simple as pulling into a driveway. You don't just whip around the cul-de-sac and ease into a spot. This thing weighed enough to crack concrete if handled wrong. I needed to plan the path carefully, from trailer to lawn without destroying my own property in the process. Luckily, my yard had a slight slope that connected smoothly to the street. With a little plywood under the treads, it would roll in just fine. I measured, I mapped, even talked to a buddy at the DMV to double-check the legalities. Turns out if a vehicle is demilitarized and registered as a collector's item, it's no different than parking a classic car in your yard. HOA bylaws said nothing about tanks. I chuckled as I highlighted that section in the bylaws printout. Karen, I muttered, you have no idea what's coming. Meanwhile, Karen kept escalating. She strutted around the neighborhood with her clipboard spreading rumors about me being unstable. She claimed my truck was leaking fluids that poisoned the grass. She even stood outside my house one morning, arms crossed, watching as I left for work like some kind of warden, making sure her prisoner didn't escape. But I didn't flinch. I just tipped my hat and said, "Morning, Karen." Her scowl deepened each time. The neighbors, though, they started sensing something was brewing. They'd see me measuring mud, hauling sheets of plywood, taking mysterious phone calls on the porch. Whispers floated through the cul-de-sac. What's he planning? Maybe he's finally giving in. Nah, look at him. He's up to something. They weren't wrong. Delivery day came faster than I expected. Rick pulled up just after noon, driving a semi with the tank strapped to a massive flatbed trailer. The sun glinted off the steel, the cannon angled skyward like a monument. It was the kind of sight that makes you rub your eyes to make sure you're not dreaming. The rumble of the truck echoed down the block. Curtain switch doors opened. Before long, a crowd had gathered. Kids gawk, parents pointed. Phones came out recording every second. And right on cue, Karen stormed out of her house. What is the meaning of this? She shrieked, stomping toward the trailer, as though she could personally block 30 tons of fistery with her 5 feet to frame. I leaned casually against my fence. Karen, you said I can't park my truck in the yard, so I listened. I'm not parking a truck. Her jaw tightened. That is a weapon of war. Correction, I said, holding up the paperwork Rick had provided. This is a legally fully demilitarized historical vehicle, and according to HOA bylaws, there's no prohibition against parking one on private property. The crowd laughed. Phones zoomed in on her crimson face. Karen sputtered, flipping through her clipboard like the rules might magically rewrite themselves to fit her argument. But nothing came, no law, no fine, no loophole. As the flatbed lowered and the tank's treads touched the ground, the neighborhood went silent. The engine roared to life, deep in thunderous shaking windows and rattling dishes inside houses. Rick climbed down, grinning ear to ear, and waved me over. Want the honors? He squeaked. I climbed up, slid into the driver's seat, and felt the vibrations rumble through my bones. Then, slowly, carefully, I guided the beast down the makeshift plywood path across my driveway and onto my yard. The tank settled into place like it had been waiting for this moment its entire life. I cut the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the applause. Neighbors who'd been too scared to look me in the eye before were now cheering, clapping, laughing. Even old Mr. Jenkins down the street, who hadn't smiled in years, let out a cackle. Karen. She was shaking with fury. This is outrageous. She screamed. This is intimidation. This is illegal. I hopped down from the tank, papers in hand, and gave her my widest grin. No, Karen, this is parking. That crowd erupted, and in that moment, I knew the war had shifted. The moment the engine thundered to life, I knew I had her. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence. The tank's roar wasn't like any truck or SUV. It was the guttural growl of history itself. the kind of sound that once rolled across battlefields and shook the ground under soldiers' boots. Even standing outside, I felt it in my chest like my heartbeat, that had synced with 30 tons of steel. Neighbors stumbled out of their houses as if the rumble had pulled them by invisible strings. Screens, doors slammed, flip-flops slapped on pavement, and phones popped into the air like prairie dogs. And there at the center of it all was Karen, arms crossed, face already flushed. Crimson clipboard clutched so tight I thought she'd snap it in half. "You can't do this," she screamed over the roar, but her voice was swallowed whole by the machine. I eased the tank forward, treads crushing the plywood path I'd carefully laid out. Each clank and grind felt like punctuation, a slow, deliberate march that said, "I'm not backing down, not now, not ever." Kids screamed, but not in fear. They hollered with the kind of joy that only pure chaos can inspire. "It's a tank. Oh my God, look at it. This is awesome." Some neighbors laughed, others gasped, but no one turned away. Even the ones who'd avoided me for months now leaned forward, caught in the gravity of the spectacle. Karen, though, was frozen. In place, eyes darting between the tank and the crowd. She'd wanted control. She'd wanted obedience. Instead, she had unaudienced, and not one of them was cheering for her. The tank rolled off the plywood and onto my yard with a hiss and a groan. The grass flattened, the ground trembled, and the whole neighborhood seemed to exhale at once. It throttled down, let the beast crawl forward a few more feet, then cut the engine. Silence swept over us, heavy and in pursuit for a moment. Even the birds held their breath. Then the applause started. At first, just a chuckle from old Mr. Jenkins, down the block. Then a laugh from the Alvarez kids. Then full-blown clapping whistles. Cheers. The sound grew and rolled across the cul-de-sac until the whole place felt like a stadium. Karen's face twisted in horror. "This isn't funny," she shrieked. "This is a weapon of war. You've endangered every family here." I hopped down from the driver's seat, landed on the grass with a thud, and held up the paperwork Rick had printed out. Demilitarized, registered, legal, and most importantly, completely within HOA. I grinned. "You said I couldn't park a truck." "Well, Karen, this isn't a truck." The laughter doubled. Karen's fury boiled over. She shoved her clipboard at me like it was a sword. "You think this is a joke? I will find you into bankruptcy. I will take this to the board. You're a menace, a disgrace." Her rant cut off as the tank's tear, effectively timed by Rick with the remote motor system, began to swivel slowly. The long steel barrel rotated away from my house and came to rest, pointing straight at Karen's pristine flower bed. The crowd roared. Phones zoomed. Someone shouted, "Fire." Of course, the tank couldn't fire anything. It was gutted decades ago. But Karen didn't know that. She stumbled back, eyes wide, clipboard slipping from her hand and smacking the pavement with a crack. You can't," she stammered. I leaned against the tank, arms crossed, and gave her the calmest smile I'd ever managed. "Karen, relax. It's not aimed at you. It's just parked." The crowd howled. That's when the sirens came. 2 police cruisers pulled into the cul-de-sac, lights, flashing sirens cutting short for armament. Everyone froze. Even I felt my stomach drop, because while I'd done my homework, you never quite know how theckups will react when they roll up on a tank parked in a suburban yard. Karen lit up like it was Christmas. "Officers," she shrieked, pointing at me as if she'd just captured Al Capone. "Arrest him. He's brought a war machine into our neighborhood. This is ego." The officer stepped out, one older, one younger, both visibly stunned. Their eyes traveled from Karen to me, then to the tank. Finally, the older one spoke. "Is that an M60 Rick Street standing nearby with grease on his hands?" Nodded proudly. "Yep, demilitarized, register, read paperwork, all good." He handed over the folder. The officer flipped through the pages, nodded slowly, then looked at me, double quotes. "Sir, is this parked on your property?" "Yes, sir," I replied. "Right on my lawn. HOA president here told me not trucks allowed." So I gestured to the tank. The officer's lips twitched. He closed the folder, handed it back, and said, "Well, nothing illegal here. As long as it stays put and doesn't roll over anyone's mailbox, you're fine." The younger cop, barely hiding his grin, asked, "Mind if I grab a photo?" The crowd exploded with laughter again. Neighbors cheered as the officer posed next to the tank, thumbs up, while Rick snapped a picture with his phone. Karen, meanwhile, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. "This is outrageous," she screeched. "You're supposed to enforce the law." The older officer gave her a long, tired look. "Ma'am, the law is being followed. Maybe it's time to pick your battles." The message couldn't have been clearer. When the cruisers pull away, the party atmosphere only grew. Kids climbed onto the tank for photos. Parents laughed. And for the first time since this whole fiasco began, neighbors actually approached me, not with pity or whispers, but with admiration. "Genius move. Karen's going to lose her mind. You just made HOA history." I smiled, shook hands, and played the role of reluctant hero. But inside, I was savoring every second, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person she'd bullied, every fine she'd dished out, every ounce offer she'd abused. And now, in front of everyone, her power had crumbled. She stormed off, muttering about lawsuits and revenge, but nobody followed her. Nobody clapped for her. For the first time, the queen of Maple Crest was standing alone. And me, I had a tank in my yard, a cheering crowd at my back, and a grin I couldn't wipe off my face. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. You'd think after the tank episode Karen would have learned her lesson that maybe, just maybe, she'd crawl back into her house, pour herself a big glass of boxed wine, and rethink her life choices. But no, Karen didn't retreat. She regrouped. The very next morning, while dew still clung to the grass around my new lawn ornament, she was back on the offensive. A fresh violation notice was taped to my front door. This one in all caps, underlined twice. Violation: unauthorized hazardous vehicle parked on lawn. Immediate removal required. I laughed so hard I nearly spit out my coffee. She might as well have written, "Dear Universe, please humiliate me again." By noon, she had escalated. Not just to note an emergency HOA board meeting, they gathered in the rec center once more, all 7 of them lined up like judges in a cheap reality show. Karen stood at the center, chin raised high, papers stacked in front of her. "This," she announced, clicking to a projector slide of my tank, "is a direct threat to our community's safety and values. It must be removed immediately." Gasps from a few nervous residents, but most of the audience, they were just there for the spectacle. You could see the grins they were trying and failing to hide. I sat in the back, arms folded, waiting. Karen went on, her voice dripping with fury. "Our bylaws are clear. No dangerous, unsightly, or disruptive vehicles are permitted within Maple Crest estates. This weapon of war qualifies on all counts." The board members nodded weakly like bobbleheads on a dashboard. One cleared his throat. "Yes, well, it is unconventional." Karen seized on it. "Unconventional. It's a tank. We could all be killed." That's when I stood up slowly, calmly, let the room settle into silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, strolling to the front, "let's set a few things straight. First off, this tank is demilitarized. It can't fire. It's a big metal paperweight with treads. Second, it's legally registered, inspected, and cleared. And third, I held up the bylaws Karen had waved at me so many times. Nowhere in this lovely stack of nonsense does it forbid historic vehicles." Murmurs spread. Karen's face darkened. I turned a page and read aloud. "No boats, trailers, or unlicensed vehicles may be parked on residential lawns." Well, good news. This isn't a boat, trailer, or unlicensed dots. It's a collector's item. Perfectly allowed. Applause broke out. Not polite applause. Real hearty clapping. Someone even whistled. Karen slammed her fist on the table. "This is a mockery of the system," I grinned. "No, Karen, this is me following the system better than you," she snapped. Literally snapped. "If the board won't act, I will," she shrieked. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911 right there in the meeting, and shouted into the receiver, "Yes, officer, I need immediate assistance. There's a man harboring military equipment in a residential neighborhood." The room went silent. Everyone could hear her frantic voice echoing. Within 20 minutes, sirens wailed again. 2 more police cruisers strolled in, this time with a county inspector in tow. Karen practically dragged them into the rec center like she was delivering my executioners there. She pointed at me, then at the photos on the projector. "Arrest him, remove it." The lead officer sighed, clearly briefed on the situation. "Ma'am, we've already checked this vehicle yesterday. It's legal." Karen's jaw dropped. But it's dangerous." The inspector stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "I reviewed the registration myself. It's classified as a non-operative vehicle, fully compliant." He looked at me. "Quite the piece of history, sir. You keep it maintained." I nodded. "Fresh coat of paint last month. She runs smooth as butter." The inspector actually smiled. "Beautiful machine." The crowd laughed. Karen's face was pure meltdown. She grabbed the bylaws from the table, flipping frantically through pages as if words might magically appear. "There has to be something about dangerous equipment, about intimidation, about the younger cop," interrupted. "Ma'am, what's dangerous here is wasting police resources. This man is within his rights. If you keep calling us out here without cause, you could face consequences." Gasps. Phone started up to capture every second. Karen froze her mouth, opening and closing like a goldfish, gasping for air. I folded my arms. "Looks like the rules work both ways, huh?" That was the breaking point. Neighbors who'd once been silent began to speak up. "This is ridiculous. Karen, he's not hurting anyone. Honestly, the tank looks kind of. I'd rather live next to that than another one of your meetings." The applause returned louder than before. A can't even started from the back. "Tank, tank, tank." Karen stumbled backward, her grip on power slipping through her fingers like sand. The board members, once her loyal chorus, now looked like kids caught in the wrong classroom. Finally, one of them spoke up. "Perhaps we should reconsider enforcement priorities." Translation: "We're done backing you up." Karen's face contorted with rage, humiliation, and disbelief. She snatched up her clipboard, shoved papers into a bag, and stormed out, muttering something about lawyers and never being finished. But everyone knew she was finished. I walked back to my seat, neighbors patting me on the shoulder as I passed. One man whispered, "Legend." Another chuckled, "Never thought I'd see the day someone parked a tank just to spite her and me." I just smiled, because it wasn't just a boot spite, it was about principle. about proving that tyrants, no matter how small their throne, crumble when you stand firm. Outside, the tank gleamed under the setting sun, a monument to stubbornness, defiance, and maybe a touch of insanity. But it was my insanity, my yard, my victory. Karen thought she could break me with fines and threats. Instead, she broke herself. And for the first time in a long time, Maple Crest felt like a neighborhood again, free from her grip, united in laughter, instead of fear. The morning after the showdown, the cul-de-sac felt different, quieter, not in a bad way, but in the way a storm leaves behind aspleness. For months, Karen's voice had been the constant background noise of Maple Crest, the shrill orders through earnings, the threats, but now, her windows stayed dark, her blinds remained, her beloved clipboard hadn't been seen in days. It was as if the tank had parked not only on my lawn, but on her ego, and it hadn't moved since, of course. She tried a few last gasps, letters threatening legal consequences, emails to the board, citing community safety, but the board once, her lapdog's no responded with a simple, "We've reviewed this. No action necessary." The spell was broken. Neighbors began to loosen up around me as if the invisible fence she'd strung around my house had finally short-circuited. The Peterson kids offered to mow my lawn again. Mrs. Alvarez brought over banana bread as APU's offering. Even old Mr. Jenkins wandered over, hands shoved in his pockets, muttering, "Always hated that woman. Tank's a fine choice." For the first time since moving to Maple, I felt like I belonged. Not because it changed who I was, but because I refused to. And the tank, well, it didn't stay forever. Rick needed it back. Eventually it was his pride and joy after all. But for a few glorious weeks that machine sat gleaming in my yard, the ultimate monument to defiance. Every day, kids climbed on it for photos. Teenagers used it as a backdrop for selfies. Parents chuckled every time they drove past. Even the mailman slowed down once, leaned out his window, and said, "Sir, that's the best lawn ornament I've ever seen." When Rick finally came to haul it away, the neighbors groaned. "You should keep it. Charge admission. Karen might come back." I laughed. "Trust me, after this she's not coming back." And I was right. Karen eventually resigned from the HOA. No big announcement, no dramatic speech, just a tour email citing health concerns and irreconcilable differences. She sought her house a month later. Word is she moved to another subdivision across town. I almost pity her new neighbors. Almost. Life in Maple Crest shifted after that. Without Karen at the helm, the home meetings grew shorter, quieter, almost reasonable. No one cared about mailbox paint shades anymore. No one wagged fingers about grass length. And my truck, it sat happily on my lawn whenever it needed to, without a single note, photo, or fine. Every once in a while, someone would bring up the tank incident as it came to be known, usually with a laugh, sometimes with a shake of the head. Legendary, one neighbor would say, "Petty," another might mutter, "Brutal ways," always with respect, because when you stand your ground, literally, in my case, people notice. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the cul-de-sac in orange, my daughter sat on the porch with me. She was quiet, thoughtful. Finally, she asked, "Dad, do you think you went too far?" I chuckled. "Maybe, depends who you ask. But was it worth it?" I looked out at my lawn, at the faint tracks, still pressed into the grass, where the tank had once sat, at the peaceful houses that no longer buzzed with Karen's gossip, and I smiled. "Absolutely," I said, "because sometimes the only way to stop it bully is to show them you won't move an inch. And sometimes you have to roll in 30 tons of steel to make that point." She laughed, shook her head, and leaned against me. "You're insane, Dad." "Yeah," I replied, "but it worked." When I look back on it now, the whole ordeal feels surreal. Hosts can say they parked a tank in their yard just to win an argument with an HOA. It sounds absurd. It was absurd, but sometimes absurdity is exactly what's required to break through the nonsense, because here's the truth. Bullies don't always look like kids on a playground. Sometimes they wear blazers, hold clipboards, and hide behind bylaws. They thrive on fear, intimidation, and silence. And the longer you let them press, the more they'll convince you that giving in is the only way to survive. But giving in never works. What works? What always works is standing till, not lashing out blindly, not stooping to their level, but holding your ground with clarity, courage, and ease, sometimes a little humor. That tank wasn't about intimidation. It was a Buddha statement. You don't get to decide who I am on my own land. The lesson isn't to go rent a tank the next time you face Akron. The lesson is to remember your worth, your rights, and your backbone. Don't let petty tyrants dictate your peace. And if my story made you laugh, shake your head, or think twice about HOA power trips, then share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from. Drop your own HOA nightmares. And don't forget to subscribe for more outrageous tales. Because trust me, this isn't the last time someone underestimates the wrong homeowner.